Look at this great surroundings around me. I would even say that it's beautiful environment. Hello, my name is Pavel Savyanko, and today I explain you how to control CubeGUI and CubeLibrary using environment variables. Let's do it. So we are back to our terminal, and today I would like to demonstrate you environment variables which are relevant for CubeLibrary or CubeGUI, and how which actions do they have. Information about environment variables one can find in our user guide, which we publish after every release on our website. So if one goes on Scalasca.org, software, cube4.x, and to documentation, so there is a user guide, and here we have a chapter environment variables. In the current release, it's not complete, so I will show the version which we're about to release. So with this one, and I will go through the variables one by one. So first of all, one has to mention that there are two environment variables, two ones which are coming from CubeLibrary, and another which are coming for CubeGUI. Variables which are coming from CubeLibrary, they have also effect on a library itself, so therefore they will affect also functionality of CubeLibrary command line tools. And command line environment variables which are relevant for CubeGUI, they affect only CubeGUI functionality. So here in this chapter, they are described not in this particular order, but in this video I will go as I just said. So first to CubeLib environment variables. There are, in a sense, two variables are relevant: CubeTemp, so temp, and CubeDataLoading. So some clusters or some HPC systems have maybe not usual setup, so that they put a quota on temporary directory, quota on a number of files or on a size of files. And CubeLibrary, during its runtime, creates temporary files, and sometimes if one does a particularly large measurement or processes it, it might hit this quota. So we had already this situation, and therefore it is useful sometimes, or that's only a workaround sometimes, to inform CubeLibrary to use some another directory to store its temporary files, which might be user home directory or some another working directory where there is no such quota. So in this one specifies by setting the CubeTemp environment variable with a path to this directory. It might be there are aliases for this, so that is the standard name, but it can it reacts also on CubeTemp, temp.dir, Scalasca temp, tmp, temp, temp.dir, scorp, the same, temp, and temp.dir, because that's standard directory under Windows. So by setting this variable to some path, CubeLibrary will take this path as a temporary directory for the temporary files. Of course, this has to be accessible for this user, which is executing the tool or the GUI or something. Another environment variable is CubeDataLoading. It's a little bit advanced, let's say, not usual variable. It controls strategy with which CubeLibrary loads data into the memory or processes it. So we have different values for this environment variable. It can be keep all, which means if the data gets loaded, by first access, but it will be never unloaded from the memory. So it's basically you read on demand, but you never dump the data from the memory, so it always stays available. It has value preload. It makes Cube library to load all the data before the processing starts. So during the construction time, the cube library object gets created. Its dimensions are specified and configured, and the data is complete in the whole amount loaded into memory. That is useful when one has a relatively encapsulated setup phase and then relatively long data processing phase. So that one can optimize, parallelize it. One doesn't have maybe race condition or serialization, IO serialization, so if the data is already in memory. The third value, manual, that is rather for fine-grained control over the data loading strategy. Before every access to data, user has to specify, I need this data, so it gets loaded, and user can also unload the data manually. So that is really advanced setting when one wants to really fine-tune memory footprint. And we have another value, last n, so it's last n. This value comes in couple with another environment variable, cube number rows. So with this strategy, cube library keeps in a memory last n used rows of data. So one row, that is the data set, which is which corresponds to one specific call path, because we do it row wise. And so during the processing, during the working with data, there is some sequence of accesses to different C nodes, different call passes. So, and if one has n+1 access, so the oldest row gets dumped. And the size of this n is specified by another environment variable, cube number rows. This is also a rather advanced setting. If one would like to limit memory footprint of the cube library, one can control it by using this setting. However, it limits only the memory which is occupied by data. So if one has a really large experiment and one would like to limit its memory footprint, this would be maybe not sufficient, in sense that description of dimensions are kept completely in its tire form in memory, and there is no any memory control. So already that might be might hit upper mark. However, the data watermark basically, or maximal memory footprint, can be controlled using this value. Okay, these variables are coming from cube library, and the another environment variables are coming from or for CubeGUI. Before we go to CubeGUI, please don't forget to subscribe, press a like, and ask your questions or comments in the comments of this video. Okay, for CubeGUI are relevant also basically two major, three actually major environment variable, that is the cube doc path and cube disable HTTP docs and cube plugin tier. So the background behind this first two environment variables is the fact that sometimes one opens cube GUI on login node on a HPC system, but because of security reason, login node doesn't have a right or permission to access external internet servers. So in order to suppress even attempt to go for the documentation of about metrics on a server, and to prevent stalling of CubeGUI, one can disable connection to outside. As a side note or as explanation, we keep the documentation of metrics next to the Scorpion installation also on our server. So so it's up to date, and if one would like to see the newest, most correct documentation about metrics, one goes usually on our server, but not from every system it is possible. Therefore, one can disable this attempt. Sometimes this access to external server is not possible, but documentation is installed somewhere, and one would like to have access to it. So the setup of CubeGUI can be arranged in that way that environment variable CubeDocPath lists all places in the sequence of, let's say, priority or search order where one can find documentation about cube metrics. And in this way, CubeGUI can still access to the cube metric documentation despite the fact that one doesn't have access to the external server. So this can be achieved using the CubeDocPath variable. We're also using it, for example, for our Windows distribution. Okay, and another command line environment variable is a cube plugin there that's coming from another part of CubeGUI. Maybe you noticed already, if not the now latest, you notice that CubeGUI has plugins or plugin infrastructure, and it delivers a set of plugins for performance analysis. And these plugins can be, let's say, basically CubeGUI own. So our standard plugins, they usually installed in a library directory of in the Cube plugins directory in the installation directory. So this is basically fixed hard-coded path. Sometimes one would like to develop own plugin and install it somewhere else to mix installation, or it is some system-wide installation, so user cannot install own plugins in the same directory. So the third-party plugins, they go somewhere else, and one would like to enable them in GUI. So this one achieves using the command line environment variable cube plugin dir. It works also like a path, so you can put there a sequence of paths in search order, where the cube GUI during the start looks for plugins, tries to load them. If they are compatible or not, they will be then available or not. But this is details about it I will explain them in a video about cube plugins. Okay, that's all. I hope you like this video. Give us a like, a comment if you have any questions, and of course subscribe, and see you next time.